Hi, my name is Ashlyn Sloan, and I'm the president and founder of Safer. Welcome to our virtual conference. We are so happy that you're here. I want to thank you for being here in the midst of everything that is happening, because now is the most important time to educate yourself. And education is how we achieve real change. To begin, we will display an anonymous optional poll, which will allow us to understand our audience better. If you don't feel comfortable with answering the poll, don't worry. Thank you so much for your honesty. Now I will talk a little bit about our history. In April of 2019, a friend confided in me that she was a survivor of rape, and I didn't know what to say. In my attempts to help, I inadvertently victim blamed her. The feeling of helplessness that I felt, combined with the horror of my own ignorance, is a crippling feeling. I realized that I didn't want anyone else to feel the same way when they talked to a survivor. I realized that I needed to confront my own ignorance of the rape culture in my community. So I gathered a group of friends and started SAFER, or Students Advocating for Ending Rape. In the past year, I've created 19 presentations, as well as met with several local organizations to educate myself and our group on the various facets of rape culture. However, spreading the message to myself and 7 other people didn't satisfy us, so we decided to create a virtual conference. At SAFER, our mission is to educate high school students on the rape culture in our community so they feel safer and more supported. A lot of people have asked why we continue to use the word community when rape culture is obviously a national and global issue. Our reasoning is that using the word national and global emphasizes that there's room for passivity, and we believe that using the word community indicates that the issue is right on our doorstep and that it's unavoidable. We believe that by using the word community, change is inevitable. Our philosophy is that change only occurs through awareness and education. To go more in depth, we believe that change can be achieved through 3 simple steps. The first step is awareness. Be aware that rape culture exists in our community and that facets such as toxic masculinity and victim blaming contribute to the harmful culture. The second step is education. Strive to educate yourself on rape culture. Read articles and books, volunteer at local organizations that work with survivors, and confront your own ignorance. The last and most important step is to have empathy. Have empathy for survivors of rape and their friends and family, and then use that empathy to fuel your desire to see change in the community. Use empathy to eliminate your own passivity. In addition to myself, we have 4 other team members. We have 2 rising juniors, Kate Colburn and Nora White, as well as 2 rising seniors, Emmy Wilkinson and Indu Natarajan. Without their hard work and passion over the past 5 weeks, this conference would not be possible. As you may have noticed, our team is entirely female. We greatly appreciate the men who are in attendance tonight because this is how we achieve change. Rape culture impacts everyone, so men must be a part of the conversation too. This is why SAFER is open to everyone, and we are glad that you're here. When men and women work together, we break down an unspoken barrier. We've been using the term rape culture a lot, and so I wanted to actually define it. According to UN Women, rape culture is defined as the social environment that allows sexual violence to be normalized and justified, fueled by the persistent gender inequalities and attitudes about gender and sexuality. By addressing it when we see it, we can end rape culture. UN Women also states that every day we have an opportunity to examine our behaviors and beliefs or biases that permit rape culture to continue. From the attitudes we have about gender identities to the policies we support in our communities, we can all take action to stand against rape culture. Tonight we have 4 speakers. We have Elizabeth Truskin from DAWN, or Domestic Abuse Women's Network, who's a youth advocate and prevention education services specialist. Our second speaker is Agustina Eiff, who's a bilingual therapist for King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. Our third speaker is Representative My-Linh, who represents Washington State's Legislative District 41. Our final speaker is U.S. Representative Kim Schrier, who is a Congresswoman for Washington's 8th District, as well as a pediatrician. If you have any questions at any point, type them into the Q&A box. If time permits, we will answer them at the end, but if not, we will add them to the frequently asked questions page on our website at saferconference.org. We appreciate all of your questions.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Indu Natarajan, and I'd like to thank you all once again for joining us. So first we're going to hear from Elizabeth Truskin, a youth advisor from an amazing organization called DAWN, the Domestic Abuse Women's Network. So DAWN's mission is to support, empower, and shelter survivors of domestic abuse in South King County and help to keep us all safe by educating our community to respond to and prevent violence. In Washington, within just a 24-hour time period, 42,964 adult and child victims of domestic abuse find shelter. Additionally, 19,159 hotline calls were answered, which averages to over 13 calls a minute. Clearly, and quite unfortunately, domestic abuse is a very widespread and prevalent problem. DAWN is a very important organization which helps our community form a shared responsibility and move towards prevention and unity. Their message and work aligns perfectly with our vision here at SAFER, educating the community and starting dialogue about issues like domestic violence that plague our society and ultimately lead to a safer world.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the SAFER conference. I cannot emphasize how excited I am with all the student work that I've seen. And so welcome. So this is the presentation on intimate partner violence and sexual and reproductive abuse. My name is Lizzie. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently working for the Domestic Abuse Women's Network, also known as DAWN, and I am their prevention educator and teen advocate. So DAWN is a domestic violence specific organization. And so my job is I work with schools and teachers to prevent violence, talk to kids about healthy relationships, and essentially try to prevent all forms of violence from happening in the future. My contact information is up here at the top, and I'll show that to you a little bit later in the presentation as well. So when thinking about these issues and thinking about domestic violence in general, there's kind of two schools of thought. So most of us are used to thinking about this criminal definition over here on the left. So when we think about domestic violence, we think about the criteria for legal action. So what kind of proof is required to get a restraining order against someone, a protection order, to get some sort of citation for domestic violence. And usually in the criminal definition, it's perpetrated by any household member. So that includes intimate partners, but it could also be for roommates or for parents and children. And usually the criminal definition looks at specific moments in time to see if any laws have been broken. And this usually means physical harm or threat of imminent harm to or injury, sexual assault, or stalking. Those are going to be the specific laws that pertain to the criminal definition. And justice, in terms of this definition, typically looks like arrest, conviction, granting of a protection order, restraining order, confiscation of weapons from the abuser, things along that line. What my agency does, and what we really want community members to do, is to try to think of domestic violence in terms of this left-hand side. So this is the criteria that we use at my agency, most other domestic violence and sexual assault agencies. And so our survivors can access our services just by being self-designated, just by saying this is part of my experience. We don't require any proof of any kind or documentation. We just believe people when they come to us. We also only serve intimate partner violence. So if there are disruptions between roommates or between other family members, that wouldn't be something that we typically serve. So we're only going to be able to serve intimate partner violence. And we look and try to help with ongoing patterns of behaviors used by an individual to establish and maintain power and control over their intimate partner. This includes threat of or carrying out of physical abuse, sexual and emotional abuse. So emotional and psychological abuse are very difficult to prove in the court of law. There really aren't any laws for them, which is why it's so important that it's included with your mentality and the way that you are trying to help community members around you. And justice for our survivors looks like an increased amount of safety for them, independence, resources, and options. So along that same line, this is the tool that we use to help kind of frame what is abuse and all the different forms it can look like. So if you want to pause here to take a look at these different pieces and read more intensely, you can do that now. You can also come back and do that later. You can also do a Google image search of the power and control wheel, and these images will pop up as well. So you can see on the left-hand side, the power and control wheel, we have different elements to it, including emotional abuse, intimidation, isolation, denying, minimizing, and blaming the victim, using children, if that's part of the setup for this family, economic abuse, gender privilege, and coercion and threats. So a lot of things on this wheel are you're not going to be able to charge people in the court of law. It doesn't mean that they're not harmful. It doesn't mean that they're not part of an abusive pattern. The justice system just has a hard time with those, which is why we want you all who are listening to be able to recognize those patterns. And then of course on the right-hand side, we have the equity wheel, which has really important elements for a healthy relationship. So if you're wondering if the relationship you're in, if it's healthy or not, pretty much all of the pieces on the right-hand side should be really well represented. If they're not, then that could be an indication that your partnership is not healthy. And if you see an ongoing pattern of these tactics on the left, that could be that you're involved in an abusive relationship. So we use those kind of tools to frame our understandings. And then, of course, we have variations on the power and control wheel when we're talking about different elements of abuse. Different tactics that would work to control me are going to be different than those that would control you. So that's going to be different person per person. So, and some of that can be dependent on your identity. So on the left, we have the LGBTQ specific power and control wheel. And so that includes some more specific things, like if you're involved in a queer relationship and the community is aware of your queerness, but not your partner's, and you threaten to out your partner to the community. That would be a power and control dynamic that would be specific in queer relationships, is that threat you hang over your partner's head for exposing them to the community. And then in the middle, we have our disability wheel. And so this would be if somebody in the partnership is part of the disabled community. And so that includes things like abusing animal care that disabled person might have. That would be an extension of the power and control that an abusive partner can enact on someone if they're part of the disabled community. And then on the left, we have the immigrant wheel. And so that would be things like threatening to turn your partner in to ICE authorities or threatening to have them be deported if they leave you. That would be a tactic that you could use if the partner is an immigrant or is undocumented. So important to notice those differences and how those vulnerable populations can be affected. And then this middle link right here is how COVID-19 is impacting the power and control wheel, because different circumstances can also lead to more tactics to abuse a partner, unfortunately. So if you're interested in the COVID specific implications, you can watch that video. I think it's about 6 or 7 minutes long. Okay, and so then this brings us to sort of the marriage between what my agency does and the topic for the SAFER conference. So we have the overlap of sexual violence and domestic violence, and in the middle we have intimate partner sexual violence. So that's what this information is pertaining to. So intimate partner sexual abuse is a pattern of coercive, violent, or threatening behavior which disrupts the ability to consent to sexual acts or trust that those acts will remain private. Because most rapists and abusers are known to the victim beforehand, sexual abuse commonly overlaps with intimate partner violence. So if you're in an ongoing relationship with that person, sexual abuse can be one of the components that they use to control you. It can be the main or only component, or it can be one of many different components that keep you in a disadvantaged or a disempowered position in that relationship. And then kind of an even smaller subset would be reproductive abuse, which is a form of sexual abuse. So this would be interfering with someone's right to achieve their reproductive goal. So examples of this would be things like poking holes in condoms, refusing to use condoms or other forms of birth control, hiding birth control from your partner, removing a condom during sex without the consent of your partner, also known as stealthing, monitoring the menstrual cycle of your partner. So this is typically in cisgender male-female partnerships. We see this dynamic happening. Or pressuring someone to have an abortion or to not have one, but to take that bodily autonomy away from somebody or to interfere with their desires for if and when they want to have children. So that would be a subset of sexual abuse. Okay. And then we have on the left here, we have the power and control wheel, specifically as it relates to sexual violence. So again, you can pause the video right here and take a look at a bunch of these different examples. Note that a lot of the examples you'll see on here are not kind of technically illegal, or they would be difficult to prove in the court of law or to get a conviction. So this is why using the legal system is not the only way to get help or to frame your thinking around domestic violence. We really want to expand outside of that because there are some things that the criminal system just can't help with for some of these. So pressuring someone to sext, sharing sexual images with others, sexual pressure, and extreme jealousy are the most common warning signs that could escalate into a pattern of abuse. So if that starts, keep an eye out. If you hear your friends experiencing this, if you find yourself pressuring a partner for these things, keep that in check because oftentimes that can lead to repeated behaviors that can make your partner feel really disempowered, and that's not what we want. And then if you're interested, particularly if you want to, if you're looking to join the medical field later on, maybe after you graduate, on the left-hand side is a video about reproduction and reproductive options for people with uteruses and female anatomy. So feel free to look at that because it has survivor considerations. So if someone is experiencing reproductive abuse from their partner, it can be a really valuable thing for people in the medical field to know and to consider when they're talking to someone. And then on the right-hand side, this just, again, is meant to frame that abuse can take a lot of different forms. We're really used to seeing it only being discussed in kind of the physical realm of leaving bruises and things like that, but it is so much more than that. It is really anything that makes you feel like you don't have power and control and equity within your relationship. So with all of these things going on, the most common question that usually comes up from people is, well, why wouldn't this person just leave? And we really want to get away from that question. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But really the barriers to leaving are really extensive and vary from person to person. So one of the most common ones would be afraid of increased violence. And so chances of extreme violence or lethal violence increase about 80% during the first 2 years after separation has occurred. So that means if you leave your partner, unfortunately that can trigger your partner into exhibiting more violent behaviors because you're finally standing up for yourself. So it can actually be really unsafe for a person to leave a partnership if they don't have a lot of support and a lot of resources to make sure that that transition is going to be safe for them. So saying just leave your partner, just get out of the house or just break up with them is really not a good piece of advice at all. Keep in mind they also love their partner. They fell in love with their partner typically before these abusive behaviors started to really show themselves. Most people want the relationship to continue, but the abuse to stop. So that initial connection usually keeps people really attached to someone even if they don't treat them well. They fear they don't have anywhere to go. If they share pets or children with that person, they could be concerned for the safety. Afraid that the partner will harm themselves or the partner might threaten to harm themselves or kill themselves if somebody leaves. That is an abusive tactic. They don't have enough money to leave. Maybe their immigration status is tied to their partner. They're worried that no one will believe them or that there'll be a lack of support. Sometimes they think that the abuse is normal, or their partner convinces them that their partner that they'll change eventually, and they do not. There might be some cultural considerations, not wanting to shame the family, or everyone responds to trauma in a variety of ways. So that can be a huge barrier as well. So how to help someone in need. So this is if someone comes to you, if they start the conversation, best thing to do is listen supportively. Okay, let them guide the conversation, let them kind of control and sort of expand on what they want to expand on. And it's really helpful to say things like, I know this can be difficult to talk about. I appreciate you trusting me. How did or does this make you feel? No one deserves to feel this way. This is not your fault. That must be stressful. I'm sorry you went or are going through that. What can I do to be supportive? And they might not have an answer, so your job is to sit and listen and believe them. So that's a really lovely way to show up for someone if they have the strength to bring it up themselves. If you want to start the conversation and you're concerned with someone, try to discuss the relationship in a non-judgmental way. Your partner is trash is not going to be a really great foundation to get that person to kind of respond and have a good talk with you. So don't name call or make the person feel dumb for being with this person. Typically, it is about asking questions and having this person reflect on their relationship themselves and know that you support them. You will not be able to convince someone really that they're in an abusive relationship, and you don't want to try to convince them. You want to know what their feelings are, what their boundaries are, and to make sure that they're feeling safe. So asking questions like, how does it make you feel when they say this? You know, I saw on Instagram that they commented this. How does that make you feel? What kinds of things did they do to show you that they respect you? If you do disagree about something, how does that usually get resolved? And through some of those answers, maybe that person can start to kind of contextualize, and then you have the opportunity to chat with them about some potentially better options. I would highly recommend to use the power and control wheel. Again, just Google it. And that's a really non-judgmental way to help have that conversation. So you would say something like, this is a tool I came across that was developed by relationship experts. Does any of this feel like elements of your relationship? So then they take a look at the wheel, they go, oh my goodness, this does kind of feel familiar. And then you can step in, and it's not your judgment, it's not you making any sort of declarations. You're saying relationship experts say that these are abusive tactics. So if you're seeing parallels, what does that mean for you? And really help them kind of come to their own. There's also a teen-specific power and control wheel, if that's helpful as well. And then some things to keep in mind. Decisions concerning relationships are always the survivors. Okay, again, they're used to being with someone who tries to take power and control and decisions away from them. So you do not want to be one more person coming in trying to decide their lives for them. You really need to empower them to be at the focus, and that means sometimes supporting them with things you don't understand or things you don't agree with, okay? And we really want to avoid ultimatums, saying things like, you break up with that person or I won't be your friend anymore. Things like that, again, are just more isolating. If you can, you really want to be open and positive for whatever they decide. Also remember to keep yourself safe. If their partner is posing a threat to you, it is a fair boundary to say, I can't be with you when that other person is around. They make me feel uncomfortable, they threaten, they said this, that, and the other to me, but I'm here for you and I would love to see you at another time without them. So keeping that open. And don't make assumptions just based on what you see. There is no way to tell if a partner is abusive, really, unless you're in the relationship, unless you sort of witness some of those things, which is hard to do. And social media can make a relationship look really wonderful. A lot of times, abusers will want the relationship to look really wonderful to others. And they're very good at manipulation. So always check in with your friends and family in private about how they feel about the relationship. Commenting, you all are so cute, hashtag relationship goals, you're so lucky to have someone like that or something, before you really know the situation, can help further distance yourself from your friend or your family member that you're trying to support. And put simply, just offer love and support. You do not have to be an expert or have all of the answers. You yourself can call any number of DV hotlines. They're usually answered exclusively by advocates. So you can call the line, say, hey, I'm trying to support someone in need, and talk to them, and they're there to give you guidance. If your friend or family member is interested, offer to call with them. Just sit with them, and it can help, because it can be kind of scary to call us sometimes. And you can simply remind them that these hotlines exist and that they can call whenever they feel safe. So just letting people know that it's a really easy entry point. If they're not sure if they're in an abusive relationship, we get calls like that all the time. And we can just chat with them in the same way that you would, in a non-judgmental way. And then you can always use some online tools. So for the Domestic Abuse Women's Network, where I work, this is our support line down here at the bottom. It is 24/7, always manned by advocates who are answering, and we serve King County. But if you're outside of King County, you can always call us and still chat and still get resources in your area. These are additional resources, just hyperlinks to some really lovely activities, quizzes, TED Talks and stuff. So I would encourage you to kind of poke around some of these websites to really help your understanding. And a lot of these are going to be team specific. So they're going to be really relevant to what you and your friends might be experiencing. Additionally, on the left-hand side, this is the national networks for a bunch of different avenues that people could need help with. They also have texting options, which is really helpful. And then on the right-hand side, you have King County specific resources. So you have Dawn down here in the corner. And then next to that, you have the Northwest Network, which is LGBTQ specific, if that's the kind of support you're seeking. Abortion and reproductive health services from Cedar River, help with eating disorders, overall crisis connection, and sexual assault resources if you need them as well. And again, you have my email down here at the bottom on the left. This is also my personal work phone number. Feel free to call or text that, or you can call our overall support line if you have any other questions. And as an ending note, given the kind of situation that we are experiencing in our country right now, abuse and violence disproportionately affect communities of color and women of color in particular. To be the most effective ally in ending gender-based violence, it is vital to fight injustice in every form. Our country is taking part in the largest civil rights demonstration in our entire history, and it's our job to ensure justice for those who are fighting for it. So, strongly recommend to work to increase your awareness concerning race and racism and how that bleeds over into sexual violence, into dating violence, into community-based violence or systemic violence. So you have an anti-racist reading list, some TED Talks, And then if you choose to participate in any protests, here are some tips of how to do that most safely. So thank you so much, Safer Conference. It's been fun chatting with you. Reach out to me if you have any questions, but overall, I'm really proud of what I'm seeing happen with you and with this, this group of youth who are concerned about really important things. So I'm really proud of you. And let me know if you need anything else. Have a great day. Bye, guys.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for coming. My name is Kate Colburn, and I'm a board member of SAFER. First off, I would like to thank Dawn, the Domestic Abuse Women's Network. They've been working so hard to support, empower, and shelter survivors of rape, and it doesn't go unnoticed. Next, we have KSARC, which stands for King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. They have been supporting people who are survivors of sexual assault, which is why they are involved in our discussion. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Hello, my name is Agustina Eiff, and I am a clinical social worker. I work as a therapist at an organization called KSARC, that is the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. Having King County in its name means that we serve folks in King County, but we're not a government agency, we're nonprofits. In the state of Washington, every county has one sexual assault resource center that provides multiple services to victims and their families. So if you're looking for a place to start, whether it is for services for yourself or someone in your life, or you just want to educate yourself on the topic of sexual violence, the County Sexual Assault Resource Center is a good place to start. You will be watching this as the country has been going up in flames, pretty literally. So even though I was invited to talk about mental health and how to provide support to folks who have experienced sexual assaults, I cannot avoid the topic of race and how racism and sexual violence intersect. I will address this topic in the most respectful way that I can, given that I am not a Black woman, and I am not even a person of color. I am an immigrant, though, born and raised in Argentina, so I identify as Latina. But because I am of European descent, I am a white Latina. This means that if my grandparents had emigrated to this country instead of to Argentina, like they did, I would probably be Karen. I want to make it abundantly clear that I am not talking about the lived experience when I talk about the experiences of people of color, because I am not a person of color. I speak from a place of utmost respect and humility. I know about sexual violence because of the work I do. But my presence here, talking about race, needs to be a mere placeholder until you find someone who can speak actual truth about this from a place of lived experience. Many of you may never have thought about the intersection of sexual violence and racism, but once you do, and you see more, you look at it more closely, it's one of those things that you cannot unsee. It becomes really, really obvious. And if hearing or talking about this makes you uncomfortable, then we are on the right track. This needs to feel uncomfortable because complacency has gotten us nowhere so far. Even though I am sure that you are aware that sexual abuse and assault happen in every community of any income level, Black, brown, and Native people are statistically more likely to be the targets of sexual violence because they're more likely to be the targets of any kind of violence to begin with. People of color have historically been failed by systems, and because of this, they are more likely to experience barriers in accessing safe housing, quality education, adequate employment, healthcare. Just one of these factors increases risk of experiencing sexual violence. This means that statistically, people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness are at increased risk of being sexually assaulted, just because they're more vulnerable. People who have unstable housing or unstable employment are more likely to be sexually assaulted or harassed because they're more vulnerable and they have less leverage and so on, and who are overrepresented among those who are at risk of homelessness, underemployed, and facing multiple barriers to access quality health and education services? Black and brown people. So you see, we can talk all day until we're dry in the mouth about how we can prevent sexual assault. But the issue is not going to change until the underlying structural issues change. And racism is at the root of them all. You must have heard that most incidents of sexual assault and abuse go unreported for lots of different reasons. Survivors are afraid that they won't be taken seriously, they won't be believed, they will be shamed, maybe they think that it was their fault in some way. Now remind me again what it is that we're protesting right now. Institutional racism, right? And police violence in particular. People of color, and Black people in particular, are very aware that the outcome of any interaction with the police is very likely to be determined by the color of their skin. Can they trust that law enforcement and systems in general are going to take the report seriously, and that the victim or the offender will be treated seriously and fairly? That they will even make it out of the interaction with law enforcement in one piece? So this is a key reason why sexual assault against people of color often goes unreported. Sexual violence has historically been used as a weapon against people of color. Slaves and Native Americans were systematically assaulted without any system in place to keep offenders accountable. In fact, it was a matter of course that enslaved Black women would be raped by their owners, and the children that resulted from the assault would be the property of the rapist. So not only was the rapist not held accountable, he would even benefit from the sexual assault. Even after the Civil War, sexual violence continued to be used as a tool of control and fear, not only to intimidate, but also to incriminate Black Americans. Sexual violence continued to be used as a double-edged sword, a tool to perpetuate fear and segregation. Black women continued to live in fear of white folks wanting to remind Black communities of their place. And Black men continued to live in fear of being wrongly accused and punished. Do you remember To Kill a Mockingbird? A novel that you probably read in middle school? Do you remember what it was about? If you don't, go back and check. Did you hear just a few days ago about the guy who was bird watching in Central Park in New York City, and how a white woman immediately saw him as an attacker and used his race as a weapon against him? That is a reminder that things have not changed that much. And I could go on and on about this. And I think that we should, we must. We have to continue this conversation. Speak up, be loud, be allies, be co-disruptors. I know lots of you are being exposed to some of these ideas at school, but that may not be enough. You need to continue having these difficult conversations with your parents and your communities. I recommend you read this book, So You Want to Talk About Race, by local author Ijeoma Oluo. She lives here in Seattle, and she went to Western Washington University, so she's a local. It will give you clear and useful language to process some of these difficult topics and to share these ideas with folks who may not be there yet. So now, on to the topic of sexual assault and mental health. That's quite a change, or maybe not so much. Like I said in the beginning, I work as a therapist. I work with people of all ages who have been affected by sexual violence, from very young kids to folks in their 80s and beyond who decided it's time to heal the wounds of sexual assault because they were sexually abused in their childhood, in their youth, or even as old people. I don't have a ton of time, so I will focus on debunking a few myths about sexual assault. Being sexually assaulted, as you can imagine, is one of the most terrible events a person can experience. It has the potential to be incredibly traumatizing. However, and you may not know this, most people do recover from sexual assault. Research shows unequivocally that this is the case. I'm not making this up. There's a ton of research behind this. Even though lots of TV shows and movies portray survivors of sexual assault as basically damaged, that is not the typical outcome. People react in lots of different ways, and this depends on lots of different factors, but the majority of people do recover. We don't see the people who recover on TV because then there wouldn't be a very dramatic story to tell. The trembling, weeping, cowering with PTSD for life kind of survivor is far from the norm. It is actually the exception. This is a little known fact, but about half the people recover naturally, that's without therapy. And the rest need a little help from therapy. So please, if you know someone who has been sexually assaulted, give them space if they need it, but treat them normally, like the normal person they still are. Hang out with them just the same. Do the same silly things you used to do with them. Survivors want to feel normal. They want to go back to their lives the way they were before the assault happened. And friends and family play a key role in that. Don't feel like you have to walk on eggshells around them. They are still the same person you knew before. Research shows very consistently that the one thing that helps people recover after a traumatic event is social support. Being around other people as much as possible in spaces where they feel safe and accepted is the strongest predictor of recovery. So if you want to make a difference in survivors' mental health, be the friend who calls, the one who responds to messages, the one who tries to connect the survivor to another friend if you're not available, because you don't need to become their savior. You don't have to do anything extraordinary. Just do what you have always done with your friends. Some people don't know what to say when they find out that a friend has been sexually assaulted. They feel so awkward that they would rather avoid that person altogether. But be the one who calls. Be the one who is there just to be yourself. No training required. For those who do not recover naturally, therapy is very effective. If it wasn't, I can promise you that I would be doing something different, because I sit in my office, now I'm at home because of a pandemic, and I sit in this little corner for hours every day listening to pretty sad stories. And if I didn't know that healing does happen, I would change jobs in a heartbeat. Trauma in general and sexual assault in particular require quite a bit of specialization. It's one of those cases where the wrong kind of treatment may be worse than no treatment at all. So if you or someone you know is seeking trauma treatment following an experience of sexual assault, I suggest that they call a sexual assault center, or that they shop around for the right therapist so that they can get referrals to the right kind of therapy. Now, I have worked with lots of high school students who were assaulted by other students. And I have to say that in lots of cases, I have been deeply disappointed and saddened by the reactions of the victims' school communities, by the other kids. The victims have been shunned, isolated, gossiped about, slut-shamed, hung out to dry, and bullied to the point that they had to leave the school, their own school community where they belong. If you really care about ending sexual assaults, start by believing survivors. I know this may sound very, very elemental, but don't be a bully. That's pretty simple, right? Believe survivors and be kind to them. Be kind to everyone while you're at it. Statistics show that false reports of sexual assault are about the same or even lower than for other crimes. It's about 5% or less. And in those cases where someone is accused, but they're not charged or prosecuted, it is mostly because there isn't enough hard evidence, the kind that would convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt. It doesn't mean that nothing happened. It just means that it cannot be proved. So again, if you know of a student who was impacted in any way by sexual violence, be the one who makes room for them, who makes them feel like they belong, because they never stopped belonging, okay? Finally, don't make assumptions about how survivors of sexual assault should feel or act. Each person's experience is unique, and they are the only one who knows about it. There's no right or wrong way to react to something terrible. don't doubt a person because they're not as upset as you think they should be, or because they act upset when you think they should be okay. They are the only experts in their own life. Be there for them, no judgment. If you chose to sit through this in the middle of everything else that is going on right now, it probably means that you are committed to ending sexual violence. I appreciate your commitment. People like you are the reason why I keep doing the work I do, because I truly believe that a world without sexual violence is possible. We're in this together doesn't only apply to surviving the pandemic. We're in this together too, for real. Thank you.
Hello, and thanks again everyone for coming to this conference. My name is Nora White, and I am a board member for SAFER. I would like to thank our representative from KSARC for sharing her knowledge about how we as community members can bring awareness to survivors of rape. Our next speaker is Representative My-Linh, the Washington State Representative for Legislative District 41. Representative Tai helped sponsor Bill HB 1407, which requires that every public school in Washington State provides sexual health education for all its students. Sexual health can be directly tied into sexual assault awareness, and that is why it's extremely important to hear from people like Representative Tai. Thank you.
Hello all. Can you hear me okay? Well, first of all, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I apologize for my lack of technical expertise. Otherwise, I would have sent a video that I have made. And this is like 10 times better that I get to be in this space with you. As far as I can see, you are the leaders that we are looking up to. The comprehensive sexual health education legislations would have not been possible without so many young voices, so many young activists, so many young individuals who was so courageous of sharing your story in public. And that have shifted and making significant change for this particular legislation to be possible. Prior to serving as a state legislator, I served as school board director for the Bellevue School District. And with that, I have that strong and deep belief that a lot of our social change need to start from a place of education, and especially in your classroom, in school, having conversation with one another, because that is where you learn and you support and you have the people with these expertise to be in that space with you. I am so honored to be able to co-sponsor this important legislations and really defend it. As you may know, while the state legislature has passed this legislation, currently there is a referendum trying to turn this down. Just like so many important topics in our life, including racism, there are so many other individuals or group that continue to perpetuate falsify information. And when we think that our work is done, that a legislation has passed, that is not true. I think our work will continue, and your learning, your advocacy, your story, your voice is even more important at this point in time, because it's not about passing the legislation. It's about implementing the policy. It's about making sure that the lessons being presented, facilitated by educator to youth in classroom across our state have to meet standard, have to be science-based, age-appropriate, so that you have the tools that you need to not only protect yourself, but helping others. I am open to engage more with every single one of you in a maybe more conversational opportunity, because like I say, we are not done. This is just the beginning of making sure that we all have the tools, the know-how through educations, and pushing this particular lessons informations forward into many more generations down the road. Once again, I thank you for this opportunity, and my door will always be open to you. Please use it and let me know how I can engage with you in conversational way. Thank you, and best wishes to your conference.
Next up, we have Congresswoman Kim Schrier, who was crucial in her work to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. And we are so appreciative that she was able to join us. And so now we will watch her video.
Hello, students advocating for ending rape. I'm Kim Schrier, pediatrician and member of Congress from Washington's 8th District. First, let me commend you for your commitment to ending rape, in particular on college campuses. I wanted to let you know that as a pediatrician, I've spent the past 20 years talking with teenagers and young adults about preventing sexual violence. Typically, when I talked with the women, it was about things that they could do defensively to protect themselves. Being with a friend, not being alone with somebody they didn't know, never letting anybody else hold their drink or their food. But that's really so inappropriate because it puts the burden on them. And so I also had conversations with the boys about no means no, and that it's never appropriate to push a partner past where they are comfortable, and also that a drunk yes is not really a yes. That's why I was so proud to support VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, because in addition to addressing things like the prosecution of crimes, it really devotes a lot of resources to prevention, to teaching our children from the youngest age, boys and girls, what is appropriate respectful treatment and what is not, because we need to address violence and sexual violence head on, and that starts with education, even from a young age. I was proud to support that reauthorization. I hope it will get through the Senate quickly, and I thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you so much, Representative Schrier, as well as Representative Tai. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a Q&A. We appreciate all of your questions, and we will add them to our frequently asked questions page on our website at saferconference.org. We want to thank you so much for being here tonight. We are so thrilled that we could educate our community. We're also so grateful to all of our amazing speakers, so thank you so much. We will be putting the resources from the first presentation on our website, as well as the conference itself, if you want to go back and rewatch anything. After you leave the conference, you will be taken to a survey, and we would really appreciate it if you could fill it out, because it informs us about our audience a little better and what we can do next time. So now that you know how to be an ally to survivors of rape, you can use that knowledge to better our community. Change only occurs through awareness and education, so educate those around you. Advocate for legislative change or volunteer at local organizations like Dawn and KSARC. We also have a few more projects in the works, so keep tabs with us by going to saferconference.org. Thank you so much for being here tonight.